Good evening and welcome to our 7 Stories Up series. Tonight we're celebrating the release of Giant Robot, 30 Years of Defining Asian Pop Culture. We're delighted to have you all joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Allison Ellis and I'm a supervising librarian of programming and outreach here at SNFL. And I would like to thank all of you for coming out tonight. And I would also like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's conversation possible. I would also like to encourage you to visit the New York Public Library's website and take a look at upcoming programs just like this one. We have an excellent lineup this season featuring new nonfiction, music, and more, and we would love for you to join us in the space again. And it is now my privilege to introduce tonight's moderator, Ed Lin. Ed Lin has been a Giant Robot fan since 1995. He's the first author to win 3 Asian American Literary Awards. His latest mystery novel is Death Doesn't Forget, set in Taipei, and published by Soho Crime. His YA debut, David Tung Can't Have a Girlfriend Until He Gets Into an Ivy League College, was published by Kaya Press. Lin lives in Brooklyn with his wife and actress Cindy and son. And now it's my pleasure to welcome up all of our speakers.
Thanks so much for coming out tonight. I want to tell you about these other wonderful people on stage with me. Well, I was going to introduce Travis Louie, but he couldn't make it. He's got the longest bio, too. Claudine Ko grew up in California, where she started her journalism career at the Los Angeles Times. In the Bay Area, she won a Northern California Emmy Award for her work at KGO-TV. And in New York, she was a staff writer for Jane and Giant Robot magazines. She is a graduate of UC Berkeley and New York University and is currently the culture editor at T Brand Studio of the New York Times. Eric Nakamura founded Giant Robot as a photocopied and stapled zine in 1994 and grew the publication until late 2010. Giant Robot magazine reached a multiracial audience interested in Asian popular culture and became known as the premier magazine in the field. Nakamura built on the success of Giant Robot with stores and galleries in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, and has curated over 300 exhibitions. Currently, Nakamura works in and owns the Giant Robot store and GR2 Gallery in Los Angeles, which continues to offer pop culture goods and hold art exhibitions.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Please welcome Claudine and Eric. Well, I think I want to start by directing an anecdote about you, Eric. I remember being in the Giant Robot store in GR2 years ago, and we were just hanging out, and this kid comes in. He's like a filmmaker, and he says he got really excited about the space, and he said, "You know what? You should have like a group meeting here for filmmakers, so we can develop contacts with each other and work on screenplays." And then you said, "Okay, do it." And then he kind of froze because he was kind of expecting you to set something up and tell him what time to be there and what to work on and stuff. And so when I think about Giant Robot, I mean, art is definitely one aspect of it, but so much of it is like finding it within yourself, do it yourself and get it done and see something through. What do you think of that?
Definitely, Giant Robot starts with a whole DIY mentality, right? There's just nothing out there that I liked at the time, magazine-wise or publishing-wise. And just all the topics I liked weren't being covered. And there's also no budget for anything, right? There's absolutely no budget. So the idea was just to find ways to get things done, which is totally from a punk rock background, looking at zines where you could tell other zines had no budget either. But then I didn't have to just write about music because most of the zines I followed were always about music. And I'm thinking, why does it have to be about music? You can do other things with a just photocopied word. And I think people that do poetry probably have done this for decades and decades beforehand. And people in civil rights have done this from way back 60s and whatnot, right? This is not new, but for me, it kind of was new. It was the punk rock angle was what I saw. So in that way, yeah, the DIY aspect is just how I started. And that's pretty much everything. And to this day, it's kind of like that too. It's like when there's no budget to do something, we just still find a way to get things done without any budget. And usually I have to explain that to the staff. I'm like, here's how we're going to do it. This, and this. And guess what? It's not going to cost us a cent. And they're just like, whoa, like we can do this. Let's do this. And I'm like, yeah, we can do this. It's fun. But I think part of it too, the next part is community, right? That's where you're getting at. Someone comes in, wants to do something, and it sounds interesting. I'm like, yeah, do it. I'm going to put you at the helm. You do it. Don't make me do it. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, I think that's kind of part of it. It's just then it's fostering community too, and letting that person take the reins and develop a community. So it's that too.
That makes me think about the Big Boys, the punk rock band from Austin. I heard someone say, yes, yes, Big Boys. At the end of the concerts, they would just say, start your own band. Yeah. Did that filmmaker ever come back and start that group?
No, I think he got scared.
Oh,
Got scared.
Man. Oh, man, that's kind of a downer.
Well, maybe they went on to make movies. I'm not sure.
Okay, so for a writer, which I am, usually a writer's first book published is probably the second or third one that they've written. Is Giant Robot the first zine you started?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, so I'll keep it really short, but I think so half the time zines always come out of like you could be angry. It could come out of anger, right? That can be like an impetus to make a zine. And I was in Japanese school, and like I really disliked it. And I made a zine there, and this was in middle school. And I made a publication there, and my dad actually took me to a photocopy place and photocopied it. I made a bunch of copies, and I put it out. I left it out. I didn't say who made it. There's no bylines or anything. It just random just showed up. And that thing became a small school, and it wreaked havoc at the school. It truly did. Like the school sort of had this military vibe where you have to line up in rows. Like your class would line up in a row, and then sometimes they would do exercise, like morning exercise. And it was like, I was like, why are we doing this? And but it was just this zine that kind of breaks down all the crap I thought that was wrong there. And I was in middle school, and then it became a thing where they asked every student directly, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? I'm like, no, I wish I did it. And then I did it. Right? Yeah. Literally, that's what I did. I wish it was me, but no. Yeah. I just should have took responsibility. No one ever got in trouble either.
And then there was issue 2 with the subscription form. No.
Only one.
Okay, so in reading the whole overview of Giant Robot and people's remembrances, it seems that so many people really connected with the Jenny Shimizu issue, and Claudine's definitely one of them. You had seen Giant Robot on the stands beforehand, but something really clicked when you picked it up and you read it, and she referred to Eric as bitch early on. Let's hear about that moment.
Yeah, so I actually first started picking up Giant Robot, I think with issue 1. I went to school in Berkeley, and there were a lot of used record stores, comic book stores, so I'd see it, but Giant Robots, anime, sumo wrestlers didn't resonate with me, really. And so, but I definitely was interested. I remember seeing John Moritsugu being interviewed in that first zine and being like, hey, I interviewed John Moritsugu for the film show on the college radio station. But yeah, it wasn't until I think Jenny Shimizu was the cover of issue number 10. And at that point, Giant Robot was a full-size glossy color magazine. And I immediately was like, oh, wow, it's not just an Asian person on a cover, it's an Asian woman, and it's Jenny freaking Shimizu, who was like this extremely attractive model for the CK1 ads, the Calvin Klein perfume, back in the late mid-90s. And I opened it up, and I was really curious to know, what did Jenny Shimizu have to say about herself, and it ended up being one of the most radical, wild, candid interviews I had ever read in print. You guys, I mean, it's hard to explain. She just didn't have a, what do you call it? She didn't have a censor. And she just told these amazing stories about what it was like backstage at these like big time, fancy fashion shows. And just the rapport that Eric had with Jenny also was like super fluid, super conversational, really relaxed. And I just, you never saw that type of interviews in in publications that were sold at Barnes and Noble at the time, which is where I probably, and I think I might have found it at a college bookstore actually, but still they had all the magazines.
Just that I think in that case, or in this case, it's an example of not being a journalist, right? I have no journalism experience except for making zines, right? That's not where you learn journalism exactly. So I think because of that that's where these kind of weird relationships come from, where if I want to I can cuss her out and she's going to cuss me out, and it becomes like that's how the interview starts, right? It's just we're just messing around, and all of a sudden I'm really like, okay, this is actually an interview for my publication, but part of it's messing around and it's just getting comfortable, and then it's talking crap, and it just builds up into a lot of honesty and a lot of fluidity, honesty, and that's kind of how it all works. But I think a lot of interviews are like that.
I would actually argue that a zine is a perfect place to learn journalism, because that's where you can really write about something that you truly, truly care about. I'm a journalist, and at times it can just be a job. You just want to get your 700-word feature and done for the day, and then that's it. But if you're doing it for your zine, for your name to be on there, for something that you really, really care about.
Yeah, but it was never a job, right? It just felt like it was just something I was doing for fun. It just felt like that. It wasn't a job. I think that's the difference. There was no journalism job title. It was just doing it was kind of the title. So I think that's kind of how it worked. And I think by that is just you're sort of just doing it without knowing what the rules are. And that makes it better because you just cross all the rules and cross all the lines right away without knowing it. And that's kind of the best part about doing Giant Robot in that way. Looking back, just not knowing what the parameters were, and it becomes better because of that.
Claudine, you were going to say something.
Oh, I can't remember what I was going to say, but you should ask me what it was like to be edited by Eric and Martin.
What was it like being edited by a guy who says, "I'm not a journalist"?
In total opposition to Eric, I had been a paid journalist since I was 15 years old. I had started stringing for the Los Angeles Times, so I had a pretty formal background writing for, a big newspaper. And so when I started, when I found the Jenny Shimizu issue, I knew I wanted to write for Giant Robot, and serendipitously, I had a friend at the time. I had just moved to New York. I was in graduate school at NYU, and one of my friends and classmates was this woman, Betty, who went to UCLA with Eric, and she was like, "I know Eric. He's a really good friend of mine. He's super nice. You should email him." And that's how I pitched him. I was like, "I know Betty, and I'd love to write for you." I can't remember if I pitched ideas to you at that moment, but when I did get an idea accepted, or maybe sometimes it'd be like, "Oh, can you write about this?" That was it. It was like, "Can you write about this?" "Okay, what do you want to hear about? Who do you want me to interview?" There was really not much feedback. It was just a couple sentences, and then that was it. And so for me, I was like, usually I'll have a whole conversation with an editor. We'll go back and forth, maybe there'll be some notes. But I guess I just sort of okay, well, that's cool. I can do it. I'll just go do it. So that's how it always was.
We were low on meetings. We didn't have a lot of meetings. How any project anywhere seems to have tons of it. At the time, our meetings were like eating a popsicle and just going, what are we doing? "Oh, you're doing that. I'm doing this. Okay." And it was never formal, a sit-down meeting. It was always skateboarding in a circle going, "Oh, so what are you doing? Oh, okay. I like that." And then, just messing around more, then all of a sudden it's like, "You know what, I'm going to do this." And then, but that's kind of how the meetings were. They were never really just this sit-down. There's no chalkboard. Well, was there a chalkboard? Eventually we got one, and then we just forgot to write on it, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Like a dry erase board, and it's just hanging there, and all of a sudden we're like, it's the same thing's been there for a year. Next thing you know, right? We're not using it. So I think everything was just sort of like go with the flow, and if things were wrong, then we would have to discuss it. But for the most part, I think we were on so much good synergy that everything just kind of fit together.
Can we walk through what the actual process was like? Say, like it's the week an issue is closing. What's happening in the garage? I mean, do you have like Mac 2FXs set up? And
No, we
color
have like
correction.
Oh yeah, we had like
monitors?
so the office started off in my parents' house bedroom. Then it goes to downtown LA. We're there for a little while. Then we leave that, go back to my parents' house. We take over another room because my bedroom was too messy. So I was like, okay, we're gonna mess up this other room. So we messed up another room. I mean, really messed it up. And then and it became like it's like an office setting. And then moved to a garage. And then the garage was just it gets even worse, like more messier, right? Just we're talking like two guys just not cleaning ever. So, but it's one long table, 4 computers. Yeah, really just sitting there working it. But the good thing is because it's not in an office, we're more comfortable and we're kind of like it's like it felt like home in a way. Well, it became home, right? You're just in there all the time. But if we're in an office, I guarantee we wouldn't want to be there so much. But because we're in a garage and it's like it's kind of nice. You can step right outside. You're in a backyard. I think in that way we ended up working even harder, and it becomes like almost like this symbolic place where we just go and we just felt comfortable. There's a TV in there too, so we can watch whatever we want, and then still keep working. So yeah, and I think it makes everything more comfortable. We order a pizza and it comes right to the door. And Halloween, like on Halloween, we're not trick or treating or going out and partying. We're actually giving candy to little kids at our back, the office door, which is the garage door, right? The little kids are coming to the door, we're giving them candy. So, I mean, it's just like we're there for everything. Yeah.
In the documentary, Martin Wong says, if there's only 2 Asian guys going to punk shows, either fight and become the worst enemies or the best friends and became friends. So I'm wondering, what was the hardest thing that you ever had to do at Giant Robot or any kind of what was the biggest difficulty, the hardest thing to decide? Not necessarily with Martin, but in terms of the run of the magazine.
I mean, that's ending it, I guess. I don't know. I think that's one of them. Just ending, like doing something that long and going, okay, and not planning it ahead of time, but just sort of going, I think this is the last, this was it. Like.
What was it, a slow kind of realization?
It was kind of fast. It was like, all right, we just put this issue out, we're done, and guess what? I think this is going to be the last one. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that just came up after we were done. It wasn't planned during. We didn't know during. We just said, I think this is it. Like, we have to stop now. That's pretty sad, right? Like, we didn't have a going away party. We didn't get to, like, write, hey, last issue, get it, whatever. We didn't get to do any of that. We didn't know. And I didn't know either. Even as the owner, I didn't know. And it's just one of those things that I was like, this could have ended 2 issues earlier, but it's got to end right now. Yeah, sort of like that. That was pretty tough. But other than that, no, everything's all. Making a magazine is amazing. I mean, the amount of work is ridiculous. Yeah. Like, no one should do it. Or if you're going to do it, just know that it's one of those things you're going to look back on thinking, how did I do that? Because I can't fathom going back to doing that exact process again. There's just no way. Yeah, it's really rough. So I would.
I mean, even though you didn't have a lot of meetings, I'm sure everyone was within arm's length. So it was like, and then you just kind of.
Yeah, but it's more positive still. There's a lot of positivity. Like it's not all grim.
That should make it sound positive.
That's more of our style right there. But yeah, no, it's all like really great memories and just a lot of hard work. That's the hard part. But I think part of it though is. At the time, not knowing, right? We didn't know that was hard work. It was just what we were doing. We're just like, oh, it's normal.
I knew it was hard work. Because I had a day job. I was always based in New York. All this like trick or treat, candy giving, pizzas. I didn't have that. I had a day job that I busted my ass at. And then Eric and Martin were like, yeah, do that story. And I'm like, okay, it is 1:00 in the morning, I guess I'll start writing this thing now. And but I was young, so I could do it, and I loved it. So it wasn't painful, not that painful.
Thank you.
Okay, so not only were you on the East Coast, you're a prominent female voice at the magazine. Did you ever feel that you were, or just another writer?
Oh, that's one of the things that, like Eric was saying, you don't realize that. Yeah, no, I wasn't. I really don't think I was that aware of that. I mean, at the time, was the internet a thing yet? You know, like
It became a
it
thing.
became a
Yeah.
thing during the time, over the course of the years. But no, I just was always making deadlines all the time. So I don't think I had time to think about my role at the magazine. I was literally just writing and sleep deprived and reporting all the time. Yeah, because I was a staff writer in my day job too.
So when the day job is over, it's like, okay, now I can do something that I really care about.
Yeah. I mean, I cared about my day job, but
Yeah.
Giant Robot was special.
Like now I could spend my whole weekend chasing the story for Giant Robot.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I would leave my day job in the middle of the day. Like when I remember doing the Mooney story, there was a big mass wedding at Madison Square Garden. And yeah, sometimes I would take a long lunch and I would run out with my little camera. Because I wasn't just a writer, I took a lot of pictures. I love taking pictures. I mean, Eric, he's got his camera right here. We all took our own pictures, right? And so sometimes I would run out in the middle of the day and like do a bunch of interviews with a bunch of Moonies and then run back and like finish my day job deadlines.
One thing your photography, if you came back as a photographer, that would work for you. Like your photography was amazing. And I don't know if that was something you were trained in, but looking back, I'm like, God, the pictures were really good. You understood mood, composition, even lighting. I don't know, like it seemed like you had it all with photography, and I was always like, God, you're just doing that as like the side thing, but you're really good. I don't know if I ever said that.
Oh,
the pictures are
thanks.
amazing. Yeah.
No, you never said that. Thanks.
This is Claudine's first annual review.
I was a photographer before Giant Robot. Like this is what I was doing. I was trying to be a photographer. That's what I wanted to do. And it seems like you hit all those marks just by doing it, whereas other people, would try to do it and it just wouldn't work out as easy. But you're really good. Anyway, I can keep gushing.
Yeah.
But
No,
the pictures you took, they're like portfolio material. They're amazing.
what have I done with my life? God. Yeah, that's really nice to hear. Again, it was one of those things, I did it because I loved it. And I had no formal training. I never took any photo classes. I just had this Canon AE1. I don't even know what you call that kind of a camera. An SLR?
Yeah.
Okay, SLR. And I would set it on automatic. And
No.
well, sometimes
Awesome.
yeah,
That's okay.
automatic because I never understood like aperture. I did understand film speed.
All that doesn't matter. In the end, your pictures are amazing.
But what I
the-
understood
yeah.
was lighting, because I never had lighting equipment. I didn't have all that fancy stuff that professional photographers, like, I wasn't a photographer. I just did it. I was like, this light is nice. And so when I interviewed Maggie Chung, who was
all those pictures are amazing. That's crazy. Those photos are amazing.
who was doing press for In the Mood for Love in 2000, and it was like this junket with her, Wong Kar-wai, and Tony Leung. I don't know if you're familiar with the cast of In the Mood for Love. But being in that hotel lobby with the three of them is insane. And so, at one point, so I'm sitting like next to Wong Kar-wai. Maggie's over here. I just finished interviewing her. I just finished taking pictures of Wong Kar-wai. Tony Leung comes downstairs in this white suit, looking like sex in a white suit. And he leans over, he's got this cigarette, because at the time you could still smoke inside in New York City. And he's got this cigarette, and he sits at a table near ours, but he doesn't have an ashtray. So he leans over to my table and taps that cigarette into the ashtray at my table. And it's just like, oh. But for some reason, I didn't get to interview him. You guys did it maybe on the West Coast, but I only got Maggie and Wong Kar-wai, and each of those interviews, I would talk to them for my allotted time, and then I'd like, hey, can I go outside with you and take some pictures? And they'd be like, yeah, okay. I don't think you could do that in this day and age with movie actors. I mean, and they're like, who do you write for? Giant Robot? Okay. And then I just, like, I'd scouted out a couple of cool backgrounds. I was really into, like, cool backgrounds and then lighting. And then I just set the thing on automatic and also I should probably mention my father was really into photography. He was always taking pictures of me and my sisters when I was growing up, like super into it. And that's where I got the camera from. It was his old camera.
And you're better than him, just like that. No, I'm kidding.
Wow. Okay, so which one of you asked Maggie Chung, "Are you weird?"
I don't know. Did I ask that? I don't know.
I can't
saw it
remember
in
who
an
asked.
interview?
But when I read that, I was like, "Oh my God, that's Maggie Chung! You cannot talk to her like
No, it's okay.
that.
It's okay.
You don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like Wilbury like that." But yeah, okay.
But that's not being a journalist again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, go straight at it, do it, you know?
But apart from that,
Yeah.
Throughout the magazine's history, has there ever been anyone that you were just in complete awe of and like scared to talk to? Really intimidated?
I mean, there's been like great interviews that we've gotten to do, but I don't think intimidated. I felt really confident in doing most of them. I mean, I interviewed Miyazaki, right? Hayao Miyazaki. Well, a lot of people don't get to interview him, and I got to interview him one-on-one. Not intimidated, but, you know, also just probably not prepared well enough. So I think that's kind of part of it, too, is a lot of the interviews just not prepared, but just going straight into it, different viewpoint than everybody else. But, yeah, usually with more, probably better energy, I would think. And I think that's kind of part of it is, you know, sometimes it's just going straight at things without the full arsenal of knowledge, because then all of a sudden you become just like everybody else and you start asking the same questions about their last film or their last project or this or that. And whereas if I didn't know what that was, I asked Miyazaki, where do you go hiking? Like, where do you see the, you know, like influences from all the animals you represent? Like, where is that? And and he goes, and then all of a sudden it's just like he lights up and he's like, whoa, you know, like this is a different kind of question. And that's kind of what happened in that one. He was burnt out already, but you know, once you spark something exciting, he was like talking about hiking. He liked that, you know.
I mean, Tamla Tomita did say she always took it as a sign of respect from Giant Robot that no one ever tried to kiss her ass. Back when Asian American magazines were falling all over themselves to put her on the cover and everything.
Yeah, but she's really great. It's funny because Tamla Tomita, I don't know. I mean, she's still working, still amazing, great activist. She does everything just really amazingly well. So it's one of those things. She was just like a friend, and I don't know, editorially, all of a sudden, nothing ever really happened, which is the weirdest part, right? It's like, we'll get you next issue. We'll have you like do this whole thing, and all of a sudden, it's just like time runs out, and it's like, oh, we never did anything. And it happened to so many people, where all of a sudden, like you see them around town, or you see them all over the place, and then you think, oh, I'll get you because we're like friends, right? Or we're acquaintances or whatnot, and then all of a sudden, time runs out, and you're just like, oh, we had so many great things we've done together, and we just never put you in the magazine. Oops.
Well, just because it's not in the magazine doesn't mean it didn't happen.
No, it all
I mean,
happened.
if it's not on social media, that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, it's one of those things that to this day, though, it's like, we still do things with Tamlin if we can, and she's amazing. But yeah, she just wasn't in the magazine. It's just funny. We had a discussion about this. I was like, she was in the magazine. And then Martin looked at me. Martin's the co-editor, and he goes, no, she wasn't. And I was like, yeah, we did all these things, remember? Like, we ate shea bites with her in Hawaii once, and we hung out with her in our hotel room, and it was like, we were just hanging out, and it was by the ocean and beach, and we were having a good time, and we were taking pictures. And he looked at me and goes, that wasn't in the magazine. And I was like, oh, what were we doing? It's like, that happens. That happened from time to time. So,
But she made it in the book.
yeah, she wrote something, so it's kind of nice. And you got to talk to her.
Yeah. So in a way, Giant Robot hasn't ended. The publication.
What do you mean?
I mean, you wrote the intro to this lovely book.
I mean, I put that to bed last year. So, I mean, yes, no, in a way, I've been posting on my Instagram. Like yesterday, I flew back from California, and so I was writing this last minute post about what Giant Robot meant to me on Instagram. And so, yeah, currently right now, it's still alive in me. And
I mean,
And
I'm not an objective moderator. I mean, obviously things never die for me. Giant robot's still here.
you want to talk about this T-shirt? Eric should talk about this T-shirt.
So that's one of the first designs first thing I ever did on Photoshop, right? So Photoshop, I think we're in the 90s. I think Photoshop had layers at that point, but barely. Like, I don't think it was unlimited. I feel like there was just a few layers. But yeah, I actually designed that shirt, which we've had as a giant robot shirt forever. It then becomes a problem, a lawsuit, right? It becomes a problem because that shirt's it did really well. And then did you see, was it Iron Man 2 maybe? Robert Downey Jr. wears that shirt. I swear it has like minutes and minutes of screen time. But basically, that's my design. It got relicensed basically by the Bruce Lee company. And the company that relicensed it, long story short, went out of business. And guess who was there to pick up all the pieces? Me. So we still actually sell this shirt legally now. But that's well, not that exact version, but the relicensed version. But we actually still sell that shirt, which is ironic because then they contacted me. The Bruce Lee people contacted me and said, "So what's up? Why do you have this shirt? Like, what's going on here?" And I was like, "I bought it when that company went out of business, and I bought all of their stock, like a big ass, garage full of these shirts." And so I'm the last one standing with that shirt still.
Dude, that is a punk rock move.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
I mean, yeah. After all that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to come out ahead on this. This is how it's going to be. So.
Well, speaking of coming out ahead, now is the time that we take questions and comments and responses from the audience. Not sure if anyone has anything to say.
We also have microphones that are going to be floating around.
Yeah.
While you're thinking, I want to say thank you for coming. I mean, New York is, I don't know, publishing mecca, I suppose, more than LA, right? Right? I mean, it is. Historically,
We're eliminating more media jobs than LA is.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But still, just one of those things where we had a shop here for so many years, and always the shops were always awesome. I would come 4 times a year maybe, and New York was always amazing. So it's just lovely that, I don't know, so many of you guys came. I appreciate that a lot. So thank you.
You want to get into the East Coast versus West Coast Asians kind of thing?
So I only know the East Coast Asians from James Jean's story. James Jean, the artist, just said that it's just so different than what the West Coast is, confidence-wise. Growing up, there's just like more influences on the West Coast compared. He said the East Coast, he felt so alone out there. He was in some smaller town in Jersey, and he just said it's just a lot different than the upbringing I probably had, that he had. And he felt like the outsider of the outsiders. We were just merely outsiders on the West Coast. But out here, you're the outsider of the outsider. Like, you're way out, just like you. So,
Well, I happen to
that's
be.
all I know. I mean, I'm going by what I've
A
heard.
lot more Asians on the West Coast. In California, that's what the first stopover after the Pacific Ocean from Asia, right? And so, yeah, when I moved to New York, I grew up in California. It's different. I think that there was a freedom growing up in California, there's just there's a lot more leeway choosing what you want it to be. I think on the East Coast, there's a little bit more rigidity to what you could be as an Asian person. And definitely, I think in the professional landscape, it's a little bit more rigid, a little bit smaller than the West Coast. I think there's just a slightly different perception of Asians on the East Coast and the West Coast, from my experience.
I still feel like there's this weird divide from East and West Coast, even with the internet. I still feels that way, but I don't know. That's just a feeling I get.
It's just the weather.
Okay, we'll take it. And time difference. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, I have a quick comment and then a question. Just a really quick comment about your school is you should really check out Neo Sora's Happy End. It's all about school authoritarian and I think it would really resonate with you. And I guess my question is, so I distribute Asian films in North America, and a lot of this work is not easy, and as you said, there's no budgets. And so I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the economics of it, because I think a lot of companies are like, oh, we're doing such good work, therefore writers should be paid $200 for a piece. And so I'm just curious what it was like in your day.
I don't think no one got paid. Basically, there was. I mean, if we would have paid $200 per writer, we would have probably not made it very far. I mean, we would have really just not made it. Unfortunately, look, we had no funding whatsoever, so it was all basically no budget. No, I don't think there was no profit either. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things. This was making a magazine is just not. I don't know how to explain that. There's just no way to make money with a magazine.
We did it for the love of it.
Yeah, it was
because
rough.
it was fun. It was cool. I got to write about people and things and places that no other publication would have ever let me. But I got free T-shirts. I got one of those. You know, I got a hoodie once. I got stickers.
I forgot. Well, the big part of it too is knowing that. That's where I started opening retail stores and stuff like that, right? But then the bad thing is, it makes the magazine not really sustainable for itself. You know, like you have a shop that's any profit there is starting to go to the magazine, and it's sort of like that's not really just a sustainable way to do business, because then you don't really, the magazine's just not earning its own keep, and it's always going to be this slight, like kind of like an anchor or something, where it just funding is just going there, but without any like moderation. You know what I mean? But that's kind of how the economics did work after a while. It's like, oh, okay, we can get paid. We can pay Martin or whatever, the co-editor or design, like we can do that, but it was just siphoning from the shops, and I don't know, that's a dangerous way to do business. I wouldn't suggest it to do that way, at least if you have to moderate it at some point, but I didn't.
And yet
there was an endless faucet. You just kept going with that.
And yet there are always people clamoring to write or photograph for Giant Robot.
I think not knowing at the time was that, I mean, we're just doing it, and you realize it was so important, like way more important to people than I could have ever imagined, right? It was just, we're just doing it. We're in a room working it, and there's occasional press where you read about it and you're thinking, wow, this writer wrote this glowing article about us and how important it is to them and how important it is to a community. And then we read that and we're like, oh, cool. And then all of a sudden it's like, you forget about it 5 minutes later and you're back to work, right? So we didn't really ingest that and turn it into ourselves at all. It just was right back to work again and pretending that never existed, basically, because we'd just forget about it.
I will say that at the time, I did know that we were doing something important. And that at the time, maybe the mainstream wasn't necessarily recognizing us, but that I hoped one day people would look back and be like, oh yeah, there was this crew of young punk Asian Americans producing this creative body of work, and maybe do a book about it. And I got that call in end of May 2023 from Tracy at Drawn and Quarterly saying, hey, we're doing a 30-year retrospective. Do you want to write the history chapter? And I was like, yes, yes, yes. It happened.
Speaking of yes, how about a second response from the audience?
I have one back here, Linda.
Hi. How do you find the balance of keeping, I guess the words would be culturally relevant, like up to date on movies and TV shows and happenings with your work? How do you find that work-life balance, I guess, especially when research on pop culture feels like it blurs the line a bit?
Well, wait, is that almost two different things? But okay, for us, I think the research at the time wasn't really internet because it was so early on. I think it was just being a fan and seeing things and getting out there more and looking at things that were places you wouldn't expect. Like we might go to a video store where no one spoke much English, and I'm looking at like videos from Asia that were all bootlegs, and it was just like a different time. And I think that's where you start discovering things, and then you're renting a bunch of movies, or you're buying, is it VCDs or something like that, like just for $1 each or something. So you're just kind of researching the hardest possible way. And I think that was but that was the fun, right? That was the part of it, that was the experience. And it's like going to a flea market and just kind of sifting through stuff and trying to find treasures. I think that's sort of like the basic way it was all done. And there were, for example, Chinese movie theaters that I don't think any it was all, I didn't know anyone else that was going to those. It was just me and Martin was going, like it was just us, Giant Robot, we would go. And sometimes the theater would be empty. It'd just be us watching some new movie that just came out that was amazing. And I think that's how it would be. Then all of a sudden now you're contacting overseas trying to get, seeing if you could like write about this or interview somebody. And it was kind of like that. It was just really just raw. There was no infrastructure whatsoever. And there was a lot of that. And then, I don't know, life-work balance, it was just mostly just work. But it was just fun though. There's no regrets on that. It was just, the work was the fun, right? I think I saw it in Heat, and then it shows up in Industry, right? The action is the juice. You know what I mean? That was like, right? It was in Industry. That was said in there. And I'm like, yeah, that was it. That was it. Exactly.
I sleep with that number.
I mean, we were young, and the stuff that we were into was the stuff we were into. So the stuff I was writing about was the stuff that I was into and wanted to be around. And, as a reporter, working on a story that no one else had written or worked on before, like that's the goal. That's the goal, to get that scoop, to get that first story. Like I remember you put out the sex issue, right? You're like, Claudine, write a story for a sex issue. And it's like, okay. How do I want to frame this? All right. And I was like, you know what? I've never seen an Asian male porn star. I want to write about an Asian male porn actor. Let's do that story. He's like, okay. And, at the time, like, how do you research that? You go to Kim's Video on St. Mark's Place, and you go to the porno room, and you look, and you look, and you look, and you see a lot of Asian chicks, and you don't see a single Asian man in that back room. And then I remember walking up to the front desk, like, hey, I'm looking for any porn with Asian actors, male actors, They're like, oh, we don't have any of those. And then that's when the fun really starts. Okay, how do I find one? I just started making phone calls to, like, I just started asking, like, you used to work at Hustler, right? And so we had a...
I didn't work at Hustler.
Okay, no. You used
Within
to work for
the
Larry
empire.
Flint.
Within
you know
the
what I'm
empire.
talking about. He used to work at Larry Flint Publications.
But it was for video games.
Okay.
The porn was in another building. Like, we were nowhere near that.
So
But yeah, okay.
we had friends, though, who worked at Hustler. And so I remember asking, like, maybe... Remember Dylan? I think he had worked at Hustler, was an editor. He became a lawyer. But, right after college, there was a big feed between UCLA and LFP, Larry Flint Publications.
Yep.
Anyways, I think I must have asked him, do you know any people in the porn industry that I can interview? And so, like, must have put me in contact with an editor. And then, it just goes from there. And it's just like this trail of crumbs. And you just follow it. And it's fun and it's interesting. You're learning this stuff for the very first time. And I was able to find a single male porn actor, Brandon Lee, with the 8-inch egg roll. It's in the book. And the work-life balance, the work was life. And the work was awesome. Life was awesome, but, a lot of sleep deprivation.
Work is life. That's like so Asian, isn't it? Speaking of work is life, is there a third question or response?
When you were interviewing Wong Kar-wai and talking about being in New York and, like, oh, let's take pictures, and they're like totally into it, and you wouldn't get that now. Do you think that was, they were massive in Asia, and, the Asian publications were all over them, but I think, one, it was a fresh take, just a naive style of interviewing and very casual. But also, the American mainstream media wouldn't even know who they were. So, they kind of had, more a freewheeling attitude, perhaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm sorry, what's the question?
Was it a question? Was it a statement?
I mean, I can talk a little bit about it. Like, why did they agree to do it? Because I think that they had come to America on a press trip because they wanted to break out and have more global, what's the word I'm looking for? Exposure, you know? Wong Kar-wai, you know, they came to New York City and they did this. And, you know, I think probably In the Mood for Love was probably one of the first big breakout films from the Hong Kong, from that art genre film, right? Yeah. And it was also just like, you know, you say it's a naive style, but like I said, I'd been a reporter for the LA Times. And so it was confidence. It was like, I'm going to take pictures of you now. Cool, let's go.
But I think part of it, too, is I think there was this network of these, maybe their publicists that knew that Giant Robot was going to give better coverage, and maybe they can get on the cover of this magazine, or if not, a full-page photo, tons of things like that. I have a feeling there was talk like that, because all of a sudden one day they offered Jet Li to come and for an interview, and he actually showed up at our office. Like, he came to hang out with us. It was the opposite. We didn't have to go anywhere. And, you know, for example, Chow Yun-fat met us on the street one day. Like, you know, it's just like there was this, it just kind of like, it just went over and over and over to the point where I was like, oh, they're all probably talking to each other. And I think that was kind of awesome, because it made our jobs a lot easier, because then they're reaching out to us saying, hey, so-and-so is going to be in LA. Do you want to interview him? Because then they would do a round table with like 10 journalists or something, or 8. And then they would give us a free day or something where we can just hang out with them and write a bigger story. And I think they knew that. So I think as time goes, that sort of becomes a thing with different genres. It's like, oh, okay, in art, you know, eventually art, it's like, oh, contact Giant Robot. They might give you a lot of coverage versus these other places. And I think that kind of happens. But it's just out of being fans, you know, we're fans of this stuff. So as we find things that are really interesting and different, cutting edge, we might just start pursuing it, writing more about it, because we're that geeked out on it. And then, then word gets around, I guess, on the outside that we don't even know about.
You know, I never subscribed to Giant Robot. I always bought the issues off the stand or from the Asian American Writers Workshop, because it's not cool to subscribe to things, you know? But did that hurt you?
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
You're forgiven, I guess. I forgive you.
Yeah. Because then, you know, it was later on I was reading these distributors would collapse and like owe you money. I'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah, behind the scenes, all that stuff's so boring and so like not great, but that's how it goes, you know. It's behind the scenes of a magazine is just it's also bad.
But I totally you know, was an evangelist for your magazine. You talk about like the share rate for each issue. I shared with so many people, and like people would like rip it off from me, and I'd have to buy another one.
But that's like the biggest honor, right? That's just amazing that people. I think people stole it from stores too. I would hear about that all the time.
People totally stole it from stores. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, okay, keep stealing it from stores then. It's just us paying for it in the end, but it's whatever, you know. It makes it pretty fun in a way. It's okay. No regrets.
No regrets.
If you stole it, it's okay.
On that note, let's have another question or response.
We have one up front.
Great. Front first, is that okay? Or I don't know, I can't see back there.
Let's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we're going to go back here first. Is that okay?
Who?
Okay.
Who has the question?
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. I'm a writer, so I actually reviewed this book for Pop Matters. Should be out this week. And I want to commend you for the awesome work that Giant Robot has done. And I just want to speak on a personal level. I'm an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, and I grew up with a lot of Asian culture as media products there. So either anime or kung fu movies in the early 90s. Coming to the U.S., specifically New York, such a diverse place, but all our media was essentially Caucasian representation, and that was really shocking. And at least for me, when a lot of this like Hong Kong new wave stuff was coming out and all this, it's like, oh, at least like there's other folks, right? And I found that aspirational. And seeing a magazine like Giant Robot covering this was something that meant a lot to me, still means a lot to me. So I want to thank you for all the hard work.
Thanks. And the funniest thing is, we're Asian American, and you would think Giant Robot was this publication that was sort of like Asian. I mean, it is got a lot of Asian topics, Asian American topics. I get that, but most, or at least half of our readers, all the way to the end, weren't even Asian. So it's just like it was for everybody. And I think the book says 30 years of defining Asian American pop culture at the top. I think our magazine said the magazine for you. I don't know if you remember that. The copies said that. That was what it was about. The magazine was like actually not aimed at any particular group. It was for anybody. So it was for you.
I am really shocked that they've already deleted Travis's name from the thing. That was like real time. That's Joseph Stalin stuff, right?
Awesome.
He was never here.
Is it okay?
Oh.
Yes, please.
Well, Eric, the point you were just making was the question I have, right? That's what I love about Giant Robot is how firmly ensconced it was in alt culture, right? And so the identity politics of the subject was almost second to the culture and the work that was being created. And we're fortunate to live in such a great time of new Asian American culture but often it can feel like representation is a filter applied to, a story that could be universal. And as someone who couldn't find a lot of stories I could relate to, that's why Giant Robot was such a great resource, because then it was like, there's cool shit happening for people who happen to look like me, who are into the things I was into before the internet existed. And so looking back at 30 years of creating and amplifying, these great stories and creators, I want to know your take on where do you think it's headed now that it seems that Asian Americans have a real seat at the table with blockbusters and new films and so much media, like both from Hollywood and independent films like A24 that are creating a lot of great works to, NYT best selling authors who happen to be Asian as well.
Wow. So I put a little bit of thought into this before, but like as much as it is, I mean, I don't know. I'm always thinking, I'm pretty skeptical. First, the magazine, or the book title now has the word Asian American in it, right? That's already kind of bold for a book to have that. It's like, oh, we're going to say Asian American culture, even though the magazine was Asian American, both. The title now says it's the book title is 30 years of defining Asian American pop culture. Like all of a sudden, it's like that's awesome to put on there. But I'm always thinking about it in terms of like this can go away really quickly too. As much as there's all these new shows, some of them are being canceled right away. Right, they're not making it past a season. I think there's always just something to watch out for. I just feel like that rug's going to get pulled one day. And I'm just being skeptical. Because it's all about money. Like, is this making money? It all has to like turn into dollars for somebody. So I'm always like really unsure and skeptical if there's a long growing future of this, or is it going to all of a sudden just sort of dive down again? But when it dives down, it always seems to come back up a little bigger. So there's always this kind of hope. And like, for example, Martin Wong's daughters in that band, the Linda Lindas, right? I mean, how big can a band get? It's just like amazing, right? This is a band of teenagers that are opening for Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins and Rolling Stones, right? It's like, wow, that's amazing. And then they did a show with Yayayas and Japanese Breakfast, right? It was like, but it's just like, this is all new ground. So, I mean, I'm always skeptical, but things always just all of a sudden peak and then they valley and they peak again. So in my lifetime, I'm probably going to see that happen over and over. There'll be bigger peaks and then there'll be like some valleys too. So I think that's just be ready for that. And if you could be ready for that, I think you'll be okay.
Okay, we can either do another question or you guys can summarize your lives at Giant Robot in 1 minute each. I'm the moderator. I'm watching
Wait,
the time.
There's a question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Take
I'll
the
go to
question.
This is probably going to be the last question. I see someone heading with the microphone down there.
Hi.
Oh, no.
Hi. First of all, just wanted to say thanks for doing this tonight. It was very enlightening. And as someone who has consumed Giant Robot for over 20 years, one, it made me feel old, but also very happy to see a room full of people who share this. And real quick, East Coast versus West Coast Asians definitely was something that was talked about with a lot of fervor on their old message board, the Robot Lounge, if anyone remembers.
Wow.
So we're talking about early days of the internet. Yeah, that was one thing that I really enjoyed participating in. Anyway, my question, because I think a lot of what we talked about tonight kind of circles around this. One of my favorite articles was the first one written by Daniel Wu. and it was about how his journey from being like some sort of architect or engineer, becoming a model in Hong Kong, and then a movie star, and he's a bona fide movie star today. He just had a trailer for a new movie. So I guess my question is, you know, in that story, he explained that he was a fan of you guys, and he reached out, and it's a trend throughout the lifespan of the magazine that a lot of people who wrote for you, in a way, like, were fans or admired what you did. Is there anyone that did or didn't write for the magazine that, like, you were really surprised that they even knew what it was?
Oh man, I think that kind of keeps on going. Like, for example, when I go to Japan, I can meet a lot of designers and artists, and you know, if they're of age, they'll just say, "Oh my God, Giant Robot! I was a huge fan," and I'm like, "You couldn't even read it," you know. But and they were buying it at Tower and just looking at the pictures and not really reading it, and you know. But there was like a large fan base for that, and there was so much going on with Giant Robots. You just sometimes you don't know. Well, most of the time we didn't know what's really happening out there, right? Everyone's looking at it and finding their own enlightenment from the pages. Like, for example, I just got invited to go to Guam, and it turns out I don't know how many copies went to Guam, but I just got invited to go to Guam, and there's a fan base in Guam. I'm like, how did it even get there? But I guess
There's a
one
fan
copy,
base in Singapore,
but
too.
I'm guessing one copy got there. And then just somebody photocopied it. I don't really know, but that's an example. It's like you never know what's really going on. Just, you know, it just has its own life, and that's when you put something out there. Anything you do, it's kind of like that. It'll have its own life outside of you. So if you're a creative person that's doing things, that's sort of how it is, and you might not ever hear about it, and that's okay. You know, that's always an honor to hear about it. But if you don't, enjoy that. It's still fine. You're touching somebody. And thanks for the Robot Lounge. That's crazy. The Robot Lounge was, when the internet was young, it was there was a message board on the Giant Robot site, and then that message board had its own crazy life that got bigger than we would even imagine. Like, people met, got married, had families, and like all this stuff happened. And then eventually we didn't even get invited to Robot Lounge events. We're just like, oh, like, you guys met up and we didn't even get invited, right? That's how it would work, and it was way bigger than us. And that's one of those things too, just like the magazine. It just, the audience gets bigger than you are, and you'll just never know what really happens. So in that way, it's just always rad.
How hardcore is NYPL on time? We have to shut down now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Oh my God, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.